That Friday afternoon felt heavy, with the particular kind of dread only a looming deadline can create. I was buried in the university library, surrounded by stacks of books on postmodern architecture, and my essay felt more like a scattered collection of quotes than a coherent argument. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from my friend Alex asking about plans for the night, but I couldn't even think about that. My entire academic future felt tethered to this one paper for Dr. Reed's seminar. I had a full-blown case of writer's block. Defeated, I decided to make one last-ditch effort and head to her office hours. Dr. Evelyn Reed was a legend in the architecture department, brilliant, demanding, and with a reputation for not suffering fools gladly. Her office was tucked away in the oldest part of the arts building, a cramped space that smelled of old paper, coffee, and something faintly floral, like her perfume. I had always found her intimidating, yet captivating. She was probably in her mid-40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a way of speaking that was both precise and lyrical. She was beautiful, but in a way that seemed secondary to her intellect, something you noticed after you were already impressed by her mind. To me, she was always just Dr. Reed, the gatekeeper of my grade. Nothing more. So when I knocked on her open door, my stomach was in knots. I expected to find her preoccupied, maybe a little annoyed by a student showing up at the tail end of her office hours. She looked up from a manuscript she was editing, a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She seemed a bit surprised to see me, but not displeased. I felt my face flush, suddenly aware of how much I was floundering. Is the air in here thick with the anxiety of an impending deadline? I almost stammered. "Hello, Marcus," she said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips as she took off her glasses. Let me guess. The critique of Venturi and Scott Brown? I fumbled with my own words for a moment, holding up my disorganized notes like a white flag of surrender. "I'm just hitting a wall. I don't think I'm going to make the deadline, and I was hoping I could ask for an extension." She let out a soft, thoughtful hum, leaning back in her chair. She tapped a pen against her chin, her gaze analytical. "An extension won't solve a structural problem with your argument, Marcus," she said, her tone frank, but not unkind. "I could give you until Monday, but you'll just be spinning your wheels for 2 more days." My shoulders slumped. She was right. "Or," she continued, pausing for a beat that felt charged with unexpected possibility, "you could come over to my place tomorrow. I'll help you." I just stared at her, completely thrown. I wasn't sure if I had heard her correctly. Her home? It felt like a line was being blurred, a boundary crossed before I even knew it was there. I had always seen her as this formidable academic figure, confined to the lecture hall and her book-lined office. The idea of seeing her in a domestic space felt different. I never imagined feeling a pull toward a professor, someone in that position of authority. We sat in the charged silence for a moment, and she gave me a beverage from a small fridge in her office. The initial part of our talk was about the paper, about the core tenets of my argument, but as we spoke, I realized she was revealing parts of herself in unexpected ways. She spoke about the sterile nature of academia, how the passion for design can get lost in citations and theory, how she sometimes felt isolated by the very expertise she had spent her life cultivating. For a little while, it didn't feel like I was speaking with my notoriously tough professor at all. It was just the two of us, sharing a moment of genuine, unvarnished honesty. And the way she was looking at me suggested she was genuinely interested in what I had to say, in my perspective. She seemed to feel a sense of intellectual solitude. For a short time, I forgot I was in a conversation with the professor I respected and feared. It was simply her and me, engaged in a candid, authentic exchange. And her expression, the way her eyes held mine, implied she was truly listening. That was when something inside me began to shift. I started to see her in a new light. There was so much more to her than just being Dr. Reed. Then she offered a soft, almost enigmatic smile. "Marcus, you have so much potential," she said. "It's hard to believe you were just a nervous freshman in my intro survey a few years ago." I didn't know how to respond, so I just managed a slight nod. A new kind of energy was crackling between us, something unspoken but undeniably there. I could feel it, a subtle spark, a quiet tension, and I wasn't sure what it meant. But I knew I wasn't ready for the conversation to end. She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, pulling down a heavy volume on urban planning. As she passed me, I caught the scent of her perfume again, fresh and delicate. And for a fleeting instant, she no longer felt like my professor. She was just a woman, an individual with her own history and her own needs. "Thank you for coming by," she added, turning back to face me, holding the book out to me. "I think this will help you frame your conclusion." I offered her a small smile, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Anytime," I said, my voice barely a whisper. As I left her office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. An unspoken seed had been planted, and I had no idea where it would lead. The next time I saw Evelyn, it was entirely by chance. I was at a small independent bookstore near campus, looking for a gift for my sister, when I saw her in the art history section. She was holding a thick monograph, studying the cover with a little frown of concentration creasing her brow. And for some reason, that small, human detail struck me. How had I never noticed how effortlessly beautiful she was? It wasn't just her physical appearance, it was the way she moved, the quiet confidence with which she occupied space. She seemed to possess a knowledge that the rest of the world was not privy to. I hadn't expected to see her outside of the university's Gothic halls, and frankly, I was unsure how to act. We hadn't spoken since that strange, intense meeting in her office. But something about that day had resonated with me. Something about her smile and the way she had looked at me lingered in my mind. Still, I had tried to dismiss it as a one-off, a weird anomaly, until she looked up from the book and her eyes met mine. "Marcus," she murmured, her lips curving into a calm, inviting smile. It was the kind of voice that immediately put you at ease. I smiled back, trying to keep my own voice casual. "Hello, Dr. Reed. I didn't expect to see you here." She gestured with the book. "Just browsing," she replied. "Trying to escape the grading pile for an hour. What about you?" A simple question, but it unfolded into a full conversation right there between the shelves. We talked about books, about the city, about other, lighter things. But underneath it all, there was a thrum of something deeper. A subtle but palpable tension was present. Little glances, quiet smiles, and then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Are you doing anything this evening?" She said it so nonchalantly, as if the answer didn't matter much, but I could tell she was testing the waters. I wasn't sure how to respond. I gave a slight shrug. "Not really, just heading back to my apartment to stare at my laptop." She smiled faintly. "My weekend is wide open. I was thinking of making dinner. You should come over. It would be nice to have some company." That offer caught me completely off guard. My gut reaction was to politely refuse. After all, besides my paper, what else could we possibly have to talk about? But the way she said it, the quiet invitation in her eyes, made it difficult to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself agreeing. "Yeah, that sounds nice." And that was it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But later that evening, as I walked the few blocks from campus to her address, a townhouse in a quiet, leafy neighborhood, my chest felt tight with a nervous anticipation. I felt a flutter in my stomach that I couldn't place, as if I were about to step into a place I hadn't been expecting to go. When I arrived, her house felt as elegant and comforting as I had imagined. The scent of garlic and herbs wafted from the kitchen, filling the space with a warmth that felt almost too welcoming. Evelyn was already in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she stirred something on the stove. I stood in the doorway, just watching her for a moment. And that's when it hit me. This woman in front of me didn't feel like the Dr. Reed I knew from class. She looked the same, yet something about her posture felt more authentic, more open. "Go ahead and have a seat," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Dinner is almost ready." I sat down at her small dining table, trying not to look as nervous as I felt. She moved around the kitchen with an easy grace, as if she belonged there in every possible way. Meanwhile, I sat there trying to understand what was happening inside me. It wasn't just her appearance or how relaxed she seemed. It was how she was making me feel, as if I were more than just her student. We ate, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. There were no awkward silences or forced small talk. We spoke about life, about how things rarely turn out the way you plan. She talked about her younger days, about her own dreams of being a practicing architect before she was drawn into academia, and how she missed the thrill of spontaneity, the feeling of being excited about something new. She admitted that with the constant cycle of semesters, everything had settled into a predictable pattern. A note of melancholy entered her voice when she said it. She seemed to have been holding back for years, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I just listened. I didn't offer any profound advice or deep insights. I simply nodded and let her speak. And as I sat there in silence, I noticed things. The way her eyes would light up when she became passionate about a topic. The genuine, unforced sound of her laughter. She was no longer just Dr. Reed. She was a woman. She had thoughts, feelings, and a life entirely her own. "Thank you," I said as we finished eating, and I started to help clear the dishes. She smiled at me, and for a brief second, I saw something deeper in her gaze. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with anyone." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave her a slight nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. There was a shift between us now, something we didn't need to acknowledge out loud. When I got ready to leave, she walked me to the door. She didn't hug me, but her hand rested on my arm for a second too long, and that single moment of contact stayed with me. "Take care, Marcus," she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper. My head was spinning as I walked back to my apartment. That evening had seemed so ordinary on the surface, yet it had loosened something inside me. I couldn't put my finger on it. She hadn't done anything overtly inappropriate, but the way she had looked at me, the way she had listened, it made me feel like there was something real between us, a different kind of connection. I had been in professors' homes before for departmental parties, but this was not the same, and I hated how much I found myself thinking about it in the days that followed. I tried to push it out of my mind. I tried to pretend that nothing had happened. A few days later, Alex called and asked if I wanted to grab a drink at a faculty and grad student mixer at a bar near campus. I figured getting out would help clear my head, but as soon as I walked in, I saw her. Evelyn was at a high-top table with a few other professors from the humanities department. She saw me, smiled, and gave a small, subtle wave. Without thinking, I waved back. Her smile was relaxed, yet it held a warmth that hadn't been there before. An unspoken awareness made my stomach do a slow flip. "Hey, Marcus," she said as I walked over. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just meeting up with Alex. I didn't know you'd be here." She laughed lightly. "Yes, trying to be social. I haven't had a night out in a while." Her gaze lingered on mine for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and just like that, the tension was back. that subtle undercurrent that hummed between us, always present, just below the surface. I should have excused myself, should have said good evening and found Alex, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself pulling up a stool next to her. We talked, we laughed, and we pretended there was nothing strange about it. Eventually, Alex arrived and joined us. The three of us sat there, talking about classes, old campus legends, and the silly things happening in our department. Even with the chatter buzzing around us, my mind kept drifting. And every time Evelyn looked my way, I felt it. That shift. Her laughter or a passing glance would elicit a response in me, something I didn't fully comprehend. It felt as though we were both holding a secret that neither of us dared to speak. Then, at one point, Alex got up to get another round of drinks, leaving just the two of us at the table. I hadn't planned to say anything personal, but the words just tumbled out. "So, Evelyn, how have you really been?" She paused. Her smile faded slightly, and for a moment I saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "I've just been feeling a little lonely lately." Her honesty caught me off guard. It was as if she had peeled back a layer, revealing someone I hadn't expected, someone who was not just the formidable Dr. Reed. "Yeah," I replied, nodding slowly. "I get that. It's not always easy." She returned my nod with a quiet one of her own, and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was comfortable, serene. I wanted to say something more, something to comfort her, to lighten the burden she seemed to be carrying, but the words wouldn't come. So I just looked at her, wondering if she really meant it, or if perhaps she was hinting at something deeper. Alex returned with our drinks, and the moment passed. But something inside me had moved. That night, my perception of Evelyn was permanently altered. She no longer felt like just a professor. There was a different kind of light around her now, a dangerous and alluring kind. Later, when we all decided to leave, I walked with Alex toward our apartments, but my thoughts were fixed on that brief conversation with her. What exactly did she mean by lonely? Was she just feeling the pressures of her job, or was she gently asking for something more? As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and replayed the entire night in my head. That dinner, that was a confession. That look in her eyes at the bar. It was then that I realized this wasn't just some random series of encounters. There was something else happening between us, something unspoken and powerful, and whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was being drawn into it. The scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted to resist anymore. The following few days felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the bar and the way Evelyn had opened up to me. Her quiet admission of loneliness, the way her gaze had lingered on mine as if she were searching for something. There was a weight in the air between us now. I couldn't shake the feeling, no matter how hard I tried. I kept telling myself that it meant nothing, that it was just a passing moment of vulnerability. But I knew better. My academic life continued. Alex and I were collaborators on a group project, so we spent a lot of time together in the studio. He was one of my closest friends in the program. But lately, even when we were supposed to be working, I would notice my thoughts drifting. Back to her. Back to Evelyn. I hated that about myself. I hated the intrusive thoughts that refused to leave me alone. Her smile. The way she carried herself with such quiet authority. She felt different to me now. That Saturday, I decided I had to clear my head. I called up Alex and suggested we go to the campus gym and play some basketball. Something physical, like the old days. Maybe if I exhausted my body, I could quiet my mind. When I got to the court, Alex was already there, practicing his jump shot. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "About time. You're late," he teased, passing me the ball. I forced a smile, muttering something about having to finish some reading. We played hard for the next hour. We were joking, talking trash, and trying to one-up each other. But my head wasn't in the game. My mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere warm, quiet, and deeply perplexing. After a while, we took a break, sitting on the edge of the court. Out of the blue, Alex asked, "You think Dr. Reed is doing okay?" He wiped sweat from his brow and looked over at me. The question threw me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. "She just seems distant lately," he said, his gaze fixed on the pavement. "Not her usual self. I don't know if she's stressed or what, but something feels off. I think she's going through something." That comment hit me harder than I expected. I had always perceived Evelyn as a composed, steady presence, never shaken or uncertain. But maybe I was wrong. "I don't know," I said, keeping my voice. "Weren't saying." Then, almost as if to change the subject, she said, "You're a good student, Marcus. You know, you have a real gift for seeing the human element in these structures." I nodded again, unsure where this was going. But her gaze stayed on me for an extra second. The same spark I had felt before was back. It hummed between us like a high-tension wire. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "I try to." She smiled, but there was something else in that smile, something I couldn't quite decipher. I wondered if she was thinking the same thing I was, and for a fleeting second, I considered asking her. I almost asked what was happening here, but I didn't. I just stood there, trapped in the silence with her, wondering where we were supposed to go from here. Finally, she broke the moment with a quiet, "Thank you again, Marcus." "Anytime," I replied, but a part of me knew I wasn't saying it in the same way anymore. A week passed since that late-night conversation in the empty classroom. The exchange hadn't been dramatic or loud, but it lingered with me. Every time I saw Evelyn on campus after that, the air felt different, charged with electricity. I couldn't tell if she felt it too, or if I was just projecting my own feelings onto our interactions. Regardless, the atmosphere between us had shifted, and I couldn't shake it. Alex and I continued to hang out as usual. He would laugh and joke, doing his best to keep the mood light. But it didn't help. Every time Evelyn entered a room, whether it was the lecture hall or the department lounge, my eyes would follow her. I noticed the small details, like the way her head tilted when she listened intently, and how her eyes would meet mine for just a second longer than was professionally necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then came Saturday. Alex had plans to go out of town for the weekend, so I was left to my own devices. It wasn't what I had planned, but I didn't mind. The truth was, I needed the solitude. I needed space to try and process what was going on in my head and in my gut. I was sitting on my couch, aimlessly scrolling through my phone, when it buzzed with a text. It was from her. "Are you free to talk?" My heart leapt into my throat. I typed back a simple, "Yes." A few minutes later she called. Her voice was unreadable. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my heart was already racing. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can we talk? In person?" That simple question made my stomach clench. "Yes, of course," I said, my phone feeling heavy in my hand. We agreed to meet at her house. The pretense was gone. This wasn't about a paper anymore. When I arrived, she led me into the living room, and we sat on the couch. We weren't touching, but the space between us was barely there. The air felt heavier. The room felt smaller. "I've been thinking a lot about our recent conversations," she began, her voice soft and cautious. "And I think I owe you an apology." I looked at her, completely caught off guard. This was not where I expected this conversation to go. "I realize I've been a bit Forward, she explained, adding that she had been dealing with some personal things and didn't mean to put me in an awkward position. I blinked, trying to read her expression. I mean, it's fine, I finally managed to say. You don't have to apologize. She offered a warm smile at that, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't entirely convinced. There was more she wasn't saying. I appreciate that, she replied, but I think I may have crossed a boundary with you. My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been dreading, and, if I was being honest with myself, quietly hoping for. I had no idea where it would lead, but I couldn't stop myself from hearing her out. What do you mean? I asked, my voice softening, becoming more cautious. Evelyn took a deep breath and looked down at her hands, which were twisting the hem of her sweater. I think you already know, she said gently. There's been something between us, and I can't keep pretending it isn't there. I froze. Her words struck me squarely in the chest, harder than I could have anticipated. Of course, I had felt it, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel more real, more tangible, and infinitely more complicated. I'm not trying to make things awkward, Marcus, she continued, her voice just above a whisper. I'm not sure how to handle this, but I can't keep pretending nothing is happening. I looked at her, my mind racing in a dozen different directions. Every rational part of me was screaming that this was wrong, that I shouldn't be here, that this could ruin both of our lives. And yet there I was. I don't want it to be weird either, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to keep the entire situation from unraveling. But I really don't know what you want me to say. She met my gaze then, her eyes direct and unwavering. We both fell silent for a long moment. The stillness was dense, laden with all the things we couldn't say out loud. Then she reached out. Her hand brushed against mine, a touch so soft and slight it was barely there, but it sent an electric jolt through me. My breath caught in my throat, and for a few seconds I couldn't move. This isn't just me being unprofessional, Marcus, she whispered, her eyes locked on mine. I'm not sure what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore, and I don't want to. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me all at once: guilt, curiosity, desire, and fear. I was acutely aware of the risks. I knew what could happen if anyone found out about this, but I also knew that the connection between us was powerful and undeniable. And a part of me didn't want it to stop. Are you sure? I asked, my voice wavering. I mean, with everything. Whatever this is. She nodded, and her fingers curled around mine, her grip firm and certain. I'm sure. And with that one word, the invisible line we had been so carefully dancing around simply vanished. We said nothing more. There was nothing left to say. But the air had changed. We both felt the shift, the immense weight of what we had just acknowledged. Everything was different after that. It's been a full year since that night on her couch. A year of us choosing to keep a secret. A year of balancing the public performance of our proper roles with the quiet, stolen time we carved out for ourselves. In some ways, it feels like we've lived an entire lifetime in those few hidden moments. We didn't talk much about the us of it all. What had begun with an offer of help on a paper had not faded away. It had simply woven itself into the fabric of our lives. It felt strangely, unnervingly natural. But it was also fragile, a delicate thing we kept guarded and close. We had agreed on one thing from the very beginning. Our own happiness mattered. And that happiness was built on a foundation of trust, a unique kind of trust that allowed us to be completely open with each other while remaining completely hidden from the outside world. We built our own small world, our own miniature version of something real. But the guilt never fully disappeared. Every time I was on campus, every time I saw a colleague of hers or a fellow student, something would pinch at the back of my mind. Not because I thought they should know, but because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Nevertheless, I never once second-guessed my decision. It was a choice we both made, and no matter how complicated or difficult things became, being with her always felt right. Evelyn and I saw each other whenever we could, which was never as often as we wanted. We never pushed the boundaries of our arrangement. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The most difficult part was the pretense. I'd see her at a department function, and we'd exchange polite, professional greetings, as if we were nothing more than a professor and her former student. But those small moments, the quick, knowing glance across a crowded room, the subtle smile that was meant only for me, the fleeting touch of our hands as we passed in a hallway, they became everything. Those were the things that held us together. When we were alone in her house, we would sometimes talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a clear plan, just hazy what-ifs and half-formed ideas. But we didn't dwell on it for long. We stayed in the present, in the quiet, in-between spaces where we didn't have to justify ourselves to anyone, where we could simply be. It was a quiet Saturday evening, about a year after our relationship had truly begun. I was back at Evelyn's house, sitting on the couch, the very same spot where it all started. The place remained a tranquil haven. Her schedule was clear for the weekend, so we had the house to ourselves again. Everything felt normal now, comfortable in a way that had once been so foreign. We had learned how to exist like this, in a state of quiet caution and deep connection. We didn't have to constantly talk about our feelings anymore. The relationship had settled into something steady, something real. It had always been unorthodox, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Evelyn sat next to me, looking as lovely as she always did. But there was a softness to her now, an ease in her posture and a serenity in her expression. It had taken time, but we had learned to carry the weight of what we had. We had grown into our secret. I had found a strange peace in it. I had figured out how to make it feel like home. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" she asked quietly, her voice warm and low, breaking the comfortable silence. I smiled and leaned back, sinking deeper into the cushions. "All the time," I said. "Honestly, I still can't quite believe we've made it this long." I looked over at her, my initial awe having transformed into something that felt a lot like gratitude. "It doesn't feel like it's been a year." She let out a soft laugh and rested her head on my shoulder. "It doesn't, does it?" she murmured. "But at the same time, it feels like this has always been our life, as if this was how it was always meant to be." I nodded slowly, my hand finding hers. "Yeah, it's weird," I said, "but it's the good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this, but now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." She tilted her head up, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. She replied gently, "Me neither. Considering the circumstances, I think we've done remarkably well. I'm glad we kept it between us." Her voice was firm, confident. "It's ours. It's just for us." And she was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built together, quietly, carefully. "I'm happy," I replied softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there, side by side, enveloped in a silence that didn't need to be filled. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. A year had passed. A whole year spent hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We had kept the secret. We had protected what we had. And through it all, we had held on to the one thing that mattered most: each other. As the evening wore on and the sky outside darkened to a deep indigo, one thought became clear in my mind. This was how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and strange and difficult, but it was ours, and it was real.